Judy Collins is an outstanding folk singer, best known probably for the hit Both Sides Now, written by her friend Joni Mitchell. She also had other hits like Sandy and the Clowns. She's still touring, and we did this interview with Judy in 2013. Judy Collins, if I may, could we start out talking about your dad in radio and Seattle?
Oh.
I didn't know that about you.
You know, my parents met on a bus in Seattle. My mother offered to help my father, who was blind. Now, he didn't use a cane, he doesn't use a dog. I don't know exactly how she knew, but she knew. And he kind of brushed her off and said, no thanks, you know, I don't need any help. And then he apologized to her and invited her out for a Coke. And they went and had a Coke, and he told her that he was going to start his radio show, this was 1937, that he'd be on the radio this coming Saturday, and would she listen? So she went with her best friend, Eileen Taylor, and they sat down in front of the radio, and my father started to sing, and my mother started to cry, and she was sobbing. He was singing, "Been so long since you went away, I think about you every day, my buddy, my buddy." And my mother was sobbing, and she said to Eileen, "Eileen, I'm gonna marry that man." And then she had to go to her parents and tell them she wanted to marry a blind man who was going to make his living as a musician. I say my mother had a lot of guts right from the beginning and was very courageous to marry a blind man who was going to make his living in music.
You were classically trained, am I right? And,
Yes.
We associate you with guitar, but it was piano, right?
It was piano, and I played Beethoven and Bach and Mozart and Debussy. And my father would put me on his radio show. You know, it was great. As you know, those were the golden ages of radio. You know, you would play the piano, sing the songs, interview write your own commercials. Now he put his script in Braille, and also he typed it for his engineer. But he was a great success in Seattle, then he moved to LA, and then in '49 we moved to Denver. And he was a big number in Denver. Everybody knew Chuck Collins on the radio.
Isn't that amazing? Is it true that you were a busker like Rod Stewart was?
No, I never was
No?
a busker. I don't know where that
was a rumor, yeah.
I don't know where that rumor started. I was always paid to
There
make
you
music.
go.
I never did a basket club, never busked.
Good.
No, I was paid a wage, you know, from the time I went to Michael's pub in Boulder, and Michael Besessi said, "Okay, I'll pay $100 a week and all the beer you can drink," and that was it. And I never took less than $100 a week.
Good for you. No, because there was
Now,
a rumor.
not so much, but
Going from classical music to folk is not a stretch, but it's a different music mode altogether. Folk talks about the people, like Pete Seeger did, and others that came along in his time. Where did that transition take place, Judy?
Well, I loved the lyrics, I loved the stories, I loved the adventurous ideas, I loved the fact that this was something very rich. It's a literature-rich tradition, and the writers, of course I knew wonderful writers eventually, and Pete Seeger's one of the great writers. I mean, he was writing songs back when Woody was too. He was writing things like "Where Have All the Flowers Gone?" Didn't write too many songs, but some very good ones. But you know, then people would come out of the woodwork. I was inspired by Josh White, by the Terriers, by Bob Gibson, who was a very big star in those days in the folk world, and by Woody and Pete, whom I got to know in New York. But you know, the Canadian writers always had an edge in terms of literature, poetry, the way things are put in the songs. I fell in love with, you know, right away was recording Ed McCurdy songs, Gordon Lightfoot songs, Ian and Sylvia songs, of course Leonard.
Ian Tyson.
And Ian Tyson, wonderful, wonderful writers. And there was something very lyrical, but very sort of heartbreaking and marvelous, and you know, the idea of Canada's a beautiful country, and there's a lot of that in the songs. You know, there's a lot of the sense, and because I was a Colorado girl, I had that sense anyway. There was that feeling of the West and the grandeur of land and the connections with land.
Were you one of the first to record, on this very note, Leonard Cohen songs?
I was the first.
That's what I thought.
He came to see me in 1966, to find out whether I thought he was writing songs. He wanted me to hear them so that I could tell him, were they songs?
Yeah.
And I said, after I heard them, I said, you bet.
Oh, yeah.
They're definitely songs and I'm recording them tomorrow. So, you know, hand me some more and get out of the way.
You were asked, this must have been a wonderful time, at Bill Clinton's inauguration to sing Chelsea Morning, which they named their daughter after the song.
Well, I always say that they tell me that they named Chelsea after my version of Chelsea Morning, but when they see Joni, they tell her the same thing. Oh. We got to know the Clintons very well, my husband and I, Louis and I, and my husband designed the Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C. on the Mall. So not aside from that, but also we had a big state dinner. There's a big celebration. At night, everybody was gone, and we go upstairs, and we're sitting in the family quarters, and one of the women on the staff says, now, Bill will be up pretty soon, you know. So it was me and Louis and Bill. It's 3 in the morning, he's still talking.
Energy.
I mean, you can't leave.
No, of course
I had to
not.
get up in the morning at 5 in the morning and go fly somewhere. You cannot leave that situation. And of course, he's so intelligent. You're just riveted with this conversation. And so personable.
Yes.
So generous, so interesting and interested. So he and I were great friends and I'm just crazy about Hillary.
He's been in town a couple of times, and the first thing he goes for is finding Indian art. He loves Native American and Canadian art. Send in the Clowns. I understand Amazing Grace because it's a traditional song and beautiful. But where did that come from? Did you handpick that one?
Well, I did handpick it, but it was sent to me by a friend of mine who was one of Leonard's best friends, who I got to know when I got to know him. And this was about 8 years later, and 6 years later, and she called me up and she said, it was 1972, she said, I'm going to send you a record, and I want you to listen to this song. And I played it and immediately fell in love with it. And I was very excited. I called Hal Prince, who was the producer of the play and the music on the cast album. I had never heard of Sondheim, nor had I heard of Little Night Music. I had no clue. Right. 72, I was going to marches and testifying at the Chicago 7 trial. I wasn't going to Broadway theater in 1972. So I called him up and I said, this is a great song you have here on this album. He said, yes, it is. It is very good. He said, it's been recorded, he said, by 200 people. And I said, wow, that's wonderful. I don't care. I have to record it. I had Jonathan Tunick, who had said, well, whenever you're ready, I'll do it, of course. And you know, the secret, I always think there's a secret to these things when they become what they're supposed to be. And the secret with this was that all the people who recorded that song, in fact, most of the ones I've heard, they don't use the original da-da-da-da, with the English horn. But because it was Jonathan and he had done it in the original recording, he used it on my recording, and I think that helped it a lot. But anyway, it became a big hit. You were part of a cadre of people, not necessarily knowing all of them or anything, but an era that'll go down in history with the Bob Dylans, with the Joan Baez, with the Judy Collins, Barry Maguire, just an incredible time in music in North America. It was a wonderful time. It was a wonderful time. You feel blessed that way? Oh, I do. I mean, I landed in the middle of this rich and diverse and tremendously eager and excited and talented bunch of people. And also I landed there when I didn't write songs. So I was kind of this dazzled individual with all the training and I was a fan, first of all. This has been an absolute pleasure. I've been wanting to talk to you for years. I've been doing this a long time too, but this is one of the best. Thank you. Oh, I'm so pleased. Thank you.